Hi guys, welcome back to Nairobi Legal Insights. My name is Rogers Githinji, and in the course of this video, I'm going to be explaining about 10 economic effects of money laundering. You might have heard of this topic of money laundering and the term wash, but I want to break it down for you so that you really get to a deeper understanding of the economic effects of money laundering and how it really destabilizes an economy. In a layman's language, money laundering is the process of making dirty money appear legitimate. And just to break down this definition further, this process involves taking criminal proceeds and disguising their illegal sources. And the purpose here is that the person wants to use funds to perform legal or illegal activities. So basically, we have person A who has gotten a lot of money through corruption. And when they get this money through corrupt dealings, this is what we call criminal proceeds. They use that money and disguise it through several investments so that it appears to the public that their wealth has either come from investment in real estate or even opening a car wash or a salon, so that it really appears that all their wealth has been earned through legitimate activities. But in a nutshell, what the person is doing, they are trying to disguise the proceeds of crime so that they look or appear legitimate before the general public. Money laundering has disastrous effects on an economy. And as you can see on your screen, we have about 11 effects of money laundering. The goal here is to empower you to understand how bad money laundering can be to an economy so that you really begin to appreciate the importance of holding criminals responsible for the crimes of money laundering. One of the first effects of money laundering is what we call the reputational risk for the country. Now, what do I mean by this point? If a country is known for money laundering, it is a place where criminals can take money and they get away with it. The effect of that is that criminals, even from other countries, are going to gravitate towards that country. They will be coming in so that they can clean their dirty money, knowing that that country has weak controls, or even if they are found responsible for money laundering, there will be no enforcement. They will not be held responsible for that crime. And so the reputational risk is going to even draw in more criminals from other countries. The second effect of money laundering is what we call loss of control or mistakes in decisions regarding economic policy. Now, once there is so much dirty money in an economy, for sure, can there be sound economic policy where we have a lot of money laundering in a country? Now, this point is going to be explored in more videos to come. The next key effect of money laundering is the fact that money laundering undermines the legitimate private sector. Now, imagine we have a businessman called Peter, and Peter wakes up early morning, works very hard, takes a loan from a bank, and maybe Peter invests in a car sales business. On the other side, we have a person using proceeds of crime to run and operate a car yard. The other person who is using proceeds of crime does not care whether, because their goal is just to clean money. It's not even for the profits. They just want their illegal money to appear legitimate. In that particular instance, Peter, who is involved in legitimate business, is likely going to suffer. Because how do you compete with someone who is using illicit finances to run their businesses while yourself, you're relying on a loan from a bank? Of course, in the long run, as part of this example, money laundering undermines the legitimate private sector. The other key effect of money laundering is the fact that it weakens financial institutions. Banks suffer. Remember, at the end of the day, when criminals get their money, they open these businesses and they're trying to really place their money into the financial system so that that money appears legitimate. Eventually, they bank their money into these institutions. So what happens if one day all people who are cleaning that money choose to withdraw their money from these banks? The impact will be a weak financial institution within a country. Now, away from that point, which we are going again to explore in more videos to come, the other impact of money laundering is loss of tax revenue. during the process of money laundering, a lot of taxes are lost because all transactions are being done undercover and illegally. So a lot of money is lost in taxes. And we're going to be exploring this point further so that you appreciate how does money laundering lead to loss of taxes. We also have what we call the economic distortion and instability of a country. Again, we have a lot of money gotten through corruption. We have people who are working in the legitimate private sector. And eventually, of course, over a certain period of time, we're going to have economic distortion as a result of money laundering, which is one of the points that I will be exploring as part of this series. Money laundering itself leads to increased crime and corruption. Remember, as people who clean dirty money are trying to clean the money, they'll end up bribing key stakeholders so that eventually their money gets into the financial system. Because if you have 1 billion in cash, your biggest headache as a criminal is that how do you make this money appear legitimate so that eventually it can be put into financial institutions and it appears that you made this money from a certain business. So the impact here is that the person who is involved in money laundering is likely to go ahead to bribe other people, either to assist them in banking this money, and also on the chain of trying to make this money appear legitimate, there will be corruption. Several people are going to be bribed. There will be more corruption encouraged so that this illicit money eventually appears legitimate along the chain of making sure that it is reintegrated into the economy of a country. And this point again will be explored in detail. Now, we also have a risk of international sanctions. You know, countries that are known for money laundering can either be blacklisted or grey-listed. The other impact of money laundering, as you can see on your screen, is what we call the dumping effect of foreign investments, a point that we're also going to explore in detail. But the idea here is to start open up your mind to see how the crime of money laundering can really, really affect an economy. It is not something that is slight on the surface. It can really put an economy on its knees. We also have an effect of social cost. You know, the common mwananchi is going to suffer. The common person, you know, is going to suffer. We also, investment in social projects is going to suffer. And again, this point is going to be explored in more videos to come. We also have what we call the risk of privatization. You know, we have the risk of privatization. We have the risk of privatization efforts. Now, in some countries where money laundering is rampant, what will happen is that even the government will start to privatize some of its state agencies. And in some countries, you will find that when a government is privatizing an institution, that process can also be used for money laundering. You'll find that the same group of people end up purchasing either ports or they end up purchasing airports. The same individuals really are working with each other to clean money in the process. And again, this point will be explored in the course of more videos to come. The goal here was to open your mind so that you see each of these 11 points can really, really affect an economy. And all these are serious effects of money laundering. Now, as we go along, I'm going to be breaking down 3 key points so that you really now get the detailed version of them. And one of the first point is going to be the effect of money laundering. How does money laundering lead to loss of taxes? And how does money laundering lead to increased exposure to organized crime and corruption? And also, how does money laundering lead to loss of control or mistakes in decisions regarding the economic policy of a country? That's what we're going to be discussing before we come to the end of this specific video. Now, further expounding on one of the effects of money laundering. So how does money laundering lead to increased exposure to organized crime and corruption, you know? Now, when a country is perceived to be a haven for money laundering, it attracts criminals who commit crimes. And of course, as you can see here, if money laundering is really prevalent in a country, more likely there is going to be corruption. And what will happen is that we are going to have typically the penetration of organized crime groups in a country. And of course, this is going to be linked to the private and the public sector corruption. And eventually, criminals may even try to bribe government officials, lawyers, leaders in financial institutions, so that eventually they can really integrate, or rather place their money into the financial system along the way so that it appears legitimate. So the process of money laundering is escalating more crime, more organized crime, more corruption. And of course, in countries where we have weak laws and enforcement, that's where criminals want to go so that they can clean their dirty money. And that's why it's very important to really curb the problem of money laundering, because as you can see, it has a ripple effect to increase bribery for different state agencies, for different stakeholders. And of course, it can also lead to bribing of lawyers, the court system, so that this, remember, the goal of this criminal is to ensure that their money enters the financial system. And they're going to come up with different transactions. It could be real estate transactions, buying land, buying property. How do they go about those transactions without being traced, Along the way, several people are going to be involved in corrupt dealings, so that eventually the 1 billion that was in a sack is eventually placed within the banking system through various investments with several key players. Just to further expound how money laundering leads to loss of tax revenue, what you need to appreciate is that of the many underlying forms of illegal activity, tax evasion is perhaps one of the most obvious microeconomic impact. And the purpose of this explanation here is for you to appreciate that money laundering diminishes government tax revenues. Again, you may wonder how. Remember, when someone is trying to clean dirty money, they're trying to avoid a lot of things, including not paying tax. And of course, indirectly, this is going to harm people who actually pay taxes legitimately. And it can also make government tax collection more difficult. Remember, when you're cleaning dirty money, you're avoiding a lot of procedures. You're involved in a lot of corruption, organized crime. You're paying off a lot of people. You're bypassing a lot of requirements that you're supposed to abide by if you are involved in legitimate business. And so this entire process leads to loss of tax revenue generally. And what that means is that people are going to pay higher tax rates than usually they're supposed to be paying. And this will be caused by the several criminals that are involved in the process of money laundering. Now, remember to understand this again so that you see the link between money laundering and loss of tax. The criminals who clean dirty money avoid paying taxes. And that is going to have an effect on individuals who are involved in legitimate businesses, and they usually pay taxes. Now, the impact of that is that in the long term, the people who are involved in legitimate businesses are going to end up paying higher taxes than usually they should have paid. This is a disastrous effect of money laundering. Like I said, because of the organized crime along the chain of cleaning dirty money, they're going to avoid a lot of tax payment through what we call tax evasion. The other effect of money laundering, like I stated earlier, is it leads to loss of control or mistakes in decisions regarding economic policy. And one may wonder, what is the link between money laundering and losing control in terms of economic policy, Now, money laundering involves large amounts of money. There's a lot of money involved in the process, billions and billions. And in emerging countries, you should really understand that these illicit proceeds, these criminal proceeds, might draft government budgets. And so what is the impact of this? This can result in loss of control of economic policy by governments, or in policy mistakes due to measurement errors in microeconomic statistics. Now, remember when a country is coming up with its economic policies, they are basing on a legitimate economy that exists. We have now this other illegal economy of money laundering, and the goal here is, how do I get my 1 billion in cash entering the legitimate financial sector or system? And of course, this is going to be done through layering and of course placement of this money into financial institutions, and eventually it will have an impact on the entire economy of a country. More still, when we have money from proceeds of crime, these millions and billions of dollars, they're going to affect interest rates. Eventually, interest rates are going to be affected, because money launderers will want to reinvest funds so that the source of their income and their wealth appears legitimate. They're going to reinvest that money. But remember, that money was not part of the legitimate economy of a country. So overall, money laundering will lead to loss of control and mistakes in decisions regarding economic policy of a country. And if you really carefully read through this summary, you really get an understanding of how crazy money laundering can really affect an economy, not only affecting interest rates, but also other things happening to a certain extent. And of course, we'll also have distortions happening within an economy in terms of assets and commodity pricing. So as we go along, I'm going to be breaking each of these points in details. Today was more of an introduction so that you really get to understand the impact or effects, the social and economic effects of money laundering on an economy. In this video, I introduced 11 effects of money laundering on an economy. So it's not really a simple topic that we talk about, but it has disastrous effects on an economy. Several countries have suffered from the crime of money laundering in the global south. And as we go along, I'm going to be explaining each of these effects so that you really begin to appreciate the topic of money laundering. Thank you so much for watching this video, and feel free to subscribe so that you receive notifications whenever we post a new video. And of course, you can follow us on our LinkedIn pages and TikTok, which is Nairobi Legal Insights. Once again, my name is Rogers Githinji, and I look forward to seeing you next time.